I'm sure most of you have heard by now, but Archie Comics are introducing their first biracial pansexual character. Thankfully, they got somebody that's really hot right now in comic books, just moving issues like nobody's business, Tee Franklin. That's not really what Tee Franklin does. That's likely not why she was hired in the first place. So let's be completely honest. What's interesting about this, and I have seen Archie and Friends Summer Lovin' #1, the one shot that comes out this week. I've perused it, I read a little bit, and I will say this. It's probably the best work that I've ever read from Tee Franklin, but there is a caveat on that. I don't really care about Archie. So if the voices are wrong and some of the plots don't make sense within Archie, I wouldn't really know it because I don't really read Archie comics, but as a story, it's perfectly serviceable. Now, Archie would like people to read this, and they are soliciting reviewers to go out there and review this comic book, and they've been sending out some press release packages encouraging reviewers to read the damn thing, and obviously hoping for some buzz around it so people will actually go buy this. Maybe some speculators that will want to see the very first biracial pansexual character in Archie Comics history. At this point, I don't think these gimmicks are going to work quite as well as they have in the past. We've seen this pretty much happen with every other publisher. Archie's just a little bit late to the dance, if we're being completely honest. And I do want to say this. Maybe you guys will be surprised, but as far as where a lot of comic creators that I think aren't doing good work at DC and Marvel, superhero comics in general, I think Archie is a good place for them. I think Mariko Tamaki would be a damn good Archie writer because she's more concerned on the slice of life aspects of the characters and their interactions and whatnot. You can see that the superheroics and the hero's journey and whatnot always takes a backseat. So I think Mariko Tamaki's writing style is much more suited for an Archie comics. I think a Christopher Can't Write Well would be much more successful just as far as executing stories on Archie comics, because then you don't have to worry about the heroic part. You don't have to worry about the character doing heroic things. And most of these writers see that aspect of the characters as being secondary. I just talked about that with Vida Ayala when she was talking about the new LGBTQ relationship in her New Mutant. She said, I didn't want to bog down their relationship with the plot. It was like, you are getting this whole thing so backwards it's not even funny. So I think even a Vida Ayala would be much more successful in Archie comics, delivering what the audience actually wants, which is relationship plottings. Unfortunately, I just think Tee Franklin probably isn't all that good a writer, even though I did say this is the least offensive thing I've ever read from her, but there are still some problems. You'll be shocked to know that the straight white male character comes off as maybe not the villain, but he's certainly the bad guy. But I do want to read from this press package that Archie Comics sent out, and just how ridiculous it is. I wonder why this comic book isn't going to sell and why they're desperate for anybody to actually review the damn thing, because no one's going to read it most likely. This is what they had to say. It's pretty funny. It's not every day that Archie Comics introduces new characters to its iconic cast of Riverdale high teens. So this week's release of the one-shot comic book Archie and Friends Summer Lovin' is a pretty big deal. It's a new story written by Tee Franklin with art by Archie legend Dan Parent. We meet Eliza Han, a biracial, pansexual, plus-size teen business mogul who starts making waves right from the start. My goodness, could we not get any more identity qualifiers latched onto the character? I mean, at this point, she's not even completely Tee Franklin yet. You know, she's almost Tee Franklin, but she's not quite there yet. The character's not autistic, at least that we know of. Everything right now is all about qualifiers. Is this character even good enough to exist anymore? Because if you're just your run-of-the-mill straight black character, that's not enough. You can't introduce a character like that. They've got to be biracial, pansexual, plus size. They got to be all these qualifiers so that people know that these characters represent them. Although once you throw so many of them on there, it doesn't really represent anybody. But I don't think Tee Franklin and Archie Comics really get that concept, that people are more likely to be attracted or attached to characters or maybe see themselves in them if they have personality traits or they have actions that are similar to them, or maybe they have a life story event that's similar to them, but they're only focused on what's on the outside, right? Because that's the only thing important in today's society. When asked about Eliza and what she means to her, Tee Franklin said, I hope that readers of all ages can see themselves in Eliza while her debut shakes things up around Riverdale, that fun-loving gag city. Hope, optimism, and friendship remains. How could anyone see themselves in this character, Eliza? You put so many qualifiers and you bashed into people's heads that this character is everything that you're not, and the only thing important about this character are their physical traits as far as their race, who they want to sleep with, and all these other factors that it really turns people off before they even get in there. But I think it would be much more effective if you introduced a character and you said, hey, this is Eliza, maybe the first biracial character in Archie Comics, or the first pansexual character in Archie Comics. You introduced a character and let people get to know them and discover all these wonderful things about them before you shout it from the rooftops that this character is so inclusive and so representative that everyone must love the character, and kind of just turning off the audience to begin with. Now, if you have been reading Archie Comics, I believe Harper has been around since about 2015-ish, almost a decade now. And this character is a disabled character, and I believe she's the cousin of Veronica, obviously one of the mainstays in Archie Comics. And she has been off and on, having a flirt with a character named Reggie. Unfortunately, Reggie is a straight white male character. And we can't have that in a story like this being competition, although they try to act like he is going to be competition. This is what they have to say about what's coming up. What T's referring to is a classic Archie Comics style love triangle when Eliza meets the gang as the new love interest for Veronica Lodge's cousin Harper, revealed to be bisexual here for the first time. The only problem is the last time we saw Harper, she had eyes for Reggie Mantle, and he's not taking this news too well. Cue the lighthearted drama. The only problem is we know what's going to happen. There's no way that Tee Franklin can write a comic book with a love triangle, including a disabled woman, and then a biracial, pansexual, fat teenage woman, and then a straight white male. Do you think this is a real love triangle? Do you think that old Reggie Mantle has a chance with Harper anymore? Absolutely not. He's going to be made to look a fool, and that certainly does happen in here. It's not the entire story. I'll give you that. It is a part of the story, but he is made to look kind of like a dickhead. Reggie's not happy that his love interest, his best gal, might be gallivanting around or going on rides at the festival with old Eliza, and he comes on very strong. In fact, he might try to commandeer her wheelchair while she's in it, and obviously Harper has to step in and say, listen, buddy, you can't just go pushing around people wheelchairs. That's rude. It makes him stop. She handles it better than most people, but he's made to look like a fool. He's the bad guy in the storybook. There's no love triangle here, which I imagine will upset some of the fans of the Reggie Harper romance from the past, but that's not the point. The point is that Ms. Tee Franklin is writing the story now, and it's time to start changing the character, because remember in the past, we've talked about aspirational characters you want to aspire to be. Like those heroic characters that go out there and they think less about themselves and more about their fellow man, and they're out there on a hero's journey. When you get a writer like a Tee Franklin, or a writer like a Waid Ayala, or a writer like a Chris Cantwell, the aspirational hero in the story is the writer. That means all the characters, if they're going to be aspirational, need to take on more of the writer's traits. This story and these plot certainly fit better in an Archie comic book, but you can see right through them. The white guy, of course, is the bad guy, and the disabled teen that was interested in the straight white male character is no longer interested in him. She's got to be interested in the pansexual plus-size business mogul that they've introduced in the comic story. I don't know. How did we get here? It's so confusing to me. The craft of storytelling has taken a backseat to a lot of the personal interests, the personal agendas of the writers themselves. Remember, most of the time when you're reading these stories, you're not reading about aspirational heroes as in the heroes that you've been reading about in the story. Iron Man, Tony Stark, can't be an aspirational hero in the story. He has to be molded and fitted into the form of a Christopher Cantwell to be aspirational, because the writer only aspires to be himself. I don't blame Archie for going out there and trying to get people excited, but it's just not going to happen. You got a bad writer on a stupid comic book story, and everyone that knows who Miss Tee Franklin is knows exactly where it's going towards. There's no surprise here. The only people that are buying this comic book are, maybe Archie collectors. Maybe the collectors of Archie are buying this because they want their full collection. Only new readers coming in are there to support the inclusion of a new biracial pansexual character. That's the problem. They're not there to support comic books. These things aren't crossing over because the stories aren't very well written. They're very heavy-handed, and people can kind of see through what's happening here. Comic readers aren't coming in on this, and that's a huge problem. If you follow Tee Franklin on social media, they talk about being drunk a lot, talk about smoking a lot of weed, and that is confirmed. Actually, there was a video out there where Tee Franklin was bashing a lot of people in the comic book industry, laying out some pretty heavy allegations. My good friend Jervain Dargan and I broke down the video, kind of talked about some of the segments from it. what it all means. This lady's a complete mess. You got to see this.